I'd like to think those early days in elementary school were joyful and carefree for most of us, but I wonder how many of my classmates knew that there was a darker side to our blissful time in Forest Oaks. You see, while most of us played and went to school, some of us were actively plotting for the conquest of Forest Oaks. I don't know if this type of thing was common throughout other neighborhoods, or if it was something unique to us, but in my immediate circle of friends, we constantly had warfare and conquest on our minds. From the planning of small military campaigns to the development of advanced weapon systems, we were a rather ambitious bunch, and I wonder if we were different from other kids, or if our attitudes were the norm. Our little empire was located at Forest Bend and Forest Haven. This was a small but prosperous hilltop region where we became a close-knit group of friends. Our hilltop vantage offered a view of a mysterious castle in the distance that was rumored to be the home of the much-feared Donkey Lady. Later we learned that Janet Forrester lived there, and I regret any implication that she or any of her family were associated with the Donkey Lady. But when looking at that mysterious castle, if you just turned your eyes slightly downwards, you looked right at the houses at the bottom of Forest Haven. There lived a group of kids that didn't really mix with us. During our days at Oak Hills Terrace, several small wars and skirmishes were fought with these kids, and the only one of them that I ever really knew well was Anne Hargrove, who I probably imagined to be the leader of her people. While these kids didn't possess the same organizational level that we did, and certainly not our sophisticated weaponry, they would never allow themselves to be subjugated by us. Probably not too different a situation from the Romans being unable to fully subjugate the people of the Scottish Highlands. At our 10-year reunion, I can remember talking to Anne, and she recounted when my friends and I advanced down the street during one of our attacks. Anne was able to perfectly describe the items that we carried. What she was describing was a weapon called a hotar, and it was developed by Hector Nahar. Basically, it was a stick with a dried mud ball that had been prepared the night before the attack. The theory was to snap the stick so hard that the hardened mud ball would fly off towards the intended target. A weapon that I like to take credit for was the ice frisbee. This was more of a strategic weapon that consisted of water being frozen into a frisbee the night before a planned attack. Using the advantage of our height up on the hill, we would loosen the ice on the hard frozen frisbee with water just enough that the inside disc of ice was starting to fall out. We would then throw the frisbee over the target in hope that the ice disc would separate from the frisbee like a bomber dropping its ordnance. It probably only worked about 50% of the time, as sometimes the ice wouldn't separate properly, or sometimes the frisbee would veer off course. But when it did work, the results were quite impressive. Looking back, you have no idea how relieved I am that we never took out a car windshield. But being unable to subjugate these kids, we finally had an official peace treaty, complete with a meeting of all parties on the border of our two warring states. I remember being a chief negotiator and going there armed with my special multi-directional water pistol, like this one here. As I made threatening statements, I would point the gun at one kid and then squirt another off to the side. I can still remember how angrily he looked at me, and for some reason this filled me with a sense of power. Some years later, I was recounting the story to my kids, and naturally they asked, "Dad, why did you even fight those kids?" I had never really thought about this before. I thought for a few moments and finally said, "Well, son, we fought the kids at the bottom of the hill because they were the kids at the bottom of the hill." Unfortunately, that was the best answer I could come up with. But our inability to subjugate those kids didn't discourage us. If anything, it spurred us on to improve our tactics and to seek out even more effective weapons. I believe that this is a case of power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We learned firsthand that none of us were immune to this profound statement, and you can see how it plays out in these four power-hungry individuals. I was given my first taste of power one day when I was playing with my friend from across the street, Jimmy Noel. One day, while in his room, I noticed this coin that he had laying around had the words "Good Luck" engraved on it. Since Jimmy was younger and had yet to learn how to read, he obviously didn't know what an incredible treasure was just lying around in his room. This was one of those fabled good luck charms that I'd heard so much about, but I was never really sure that they existed. I knew that I could use this item to subjugate others and get them to do my bidding. I knew that someday I'd have to double-cross Jimmy and secure the item for myself, but for the time being, I'd have to share it with him, because, being the boy of conscience that I was, I knew theft was wrong. But I had no problem taking the charm next door with a plan to challenge Hector and his brother Michael to a contest. When we defeated them, I would defiantly hold up the source of my power and watch them fall on their knees before me, as they would be the first of many to serve me. But as it was, my manipulative plans didn't materialize as I had hoped, and the good luck charm was retired. In the fall of 1973, Star Trek reruns began showing again in San Antonio, and my group of friends eagerly watched the first showing at my house one day after school. Immediately after seeing that first episode, Carl Blesser informed us that he had this incredible book called Star Trek Projects, where he supposedly could order Star Trek-like phasers capable of firing rays that would cause excruciating pain, and communicators that worked as well as the ones on the show. Additionally, Carl had a chemistry set where he claimed he had synthesized a liquid that when poured on the ground would create an invisible force field. Yes, these were incredible claims that he made, and we had no real reason to doubt him. After all, why would he deceive us about such a thing? Carl generously offered to buy enough phasers and communicators for each of us so that we'd be well equipped for our next stage of the conquest of Forest Oaks. As we waited for the weapons to arrive, we started making new and more grandiose plans of conquest. Oh, he also said that he ordered a few Klingon hand weapons, and of course, some agonizers.
Your agonizer, please.
No, Mr. Spock! I really tried.
While we waited for the phasers to arrive, Hector Nahar also told us that his dad was preparing to build us this really awesome clubhouse that was to be located in his backyard. This was to be our impregnable fortress that would serve as our base of operation. Each of us would have an important function within the stronghold, but it would be Hector himself who would spend his time in the map room, where he would contemplate the strategic situation of the neighborhood and issue orders to our distant armies, instructing them to go here or there and either defend or attack others who had not yet been subjugated into our empire. I always imagined that other friends, such as Woody Roberts, would be some of the generals who would carry out the orders of Hector the Warlord to command their troops in accordance with instructions from the Empire. Woody was the sort of guy that I always regretted didn't live closer to us, as I knew from the first time we met back in the first grade that he had the right stuff to be one of us. I always marveled at his charisma and knowledge of stuff that would be useful to our ambitions. So I'm confident that Woody would have been amongst our more useful leaders who would have faithfully extended the boundaries of our empire. Maybe it was best that he lived way over on Desilu, thereby minimizing the trouble that we caused. But interestingly enough, Carl never did get a permanent assignment to Hector's fortress. He was really more of a rogue wizard than a loyal one, and he would never willingly subject himself to the authority of a warlord. So naturally there was a split between Carl the rogue wizard and Hector the warlord, and the two began to turn on each other, both factions explaining how the civil war between us would play out. I sided more with Carl the wizard because of the lure of the fantastic technology that he offered, which was a natural complement to the mysticism that I sought. He and I devised a plan to attack the fortress by using the communicators to create a diversion of blasting the north corner of Hector's house and then attacking from another direction as the defenders were distracted. Carl said that he would be able to use the communicators to duplicate a sonic disruption that was achieved by Mr. Spock on Star Trek.
You think we could create a sonic disruption with two of our communicators?
Only a very slight chance it would work.
Well, if you don't think we can, maybe we shouldn't try.
Captain, I didn't say that exactly. Sound beams should produce a sympathetic vibration on the weak area of that slide.
Of course, none of these events ever transpired, as no super fortress was ever built, no such book of Star Trek weapons existed, and no fantastic things were created with the chemistry set. Hector never became a warlord, and Carl was nothing more than a charlatan wizard with a cheap bag of tricks, with a fake tribble that he said he could make breathe. He even told my mom this. And it remains to be said that even if such a battle was ever fought between the two factions, how would we ever explain to our parents that we took out the north corner of the Nahar house, all in the name of good, clean fun? So our great empire, that never was, crumbled due to civil war. But Carl and I did continue to seek power. After the fall of our empire, the one that never really existed, we obtained plans to build real lasers and other potential weapons. As we obtained these plans, we were disappointed in the fact that we lacked the capital to obtain the parts, such as a real ruby laser rod, and also the realization that none of these weapons would cause any pain or discomfort to anyone. A glimmer of hope was made when we actually constructed a crude sound pistol using Carl's electronics kit from Radio Shack. But when we tested it on Dinky, Carl's little dog, the test was something of a disappointment. Not only did Dinky not seem to be affected, he didn't seem to notice anything at all. Our experiments came to an end, and Forest Oaks was safe once again.